In Module 3, we'll explore the wisdom books and poetic books of the Old Testament. The term wisdom refers to the content, while the term poetic refers to the writing style. The wisdom books, sometimes also seen as poetic books, are Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Songs. In this session, we'll focus on poetry in the Old Testament. A large section of the Old Testament is written in a style of writing called Hebrew parallelism, or Hebrew poetry. Understanding the way Hebrew poetry is written can help you understand the message of the writer. There is an easy way to tell if a poem is written in Hebrew poetry. In translations like the New American Standard, the King James, or the Revised Standard Version, the lines will be indented and won't run from margin to margin. Hebrew poetry works differently from popular English poetry. Often when we write a poem or a song in English poetry, we emphasize the rhyming words. With Hebrew poetry, however, the writer emphasizes thought flow and generally works with 2 lines at a time. The writer will do one of 3 basic things. The poet will repeat the idea of the first line in the second line to emphasize something. The poet will develop the idea, adding more information to the original idea of the first line in the second line. Or the writer will state the opposite of the first line in the second line to drive home a contrast. Knowing how Hebrew poetry is written can help you understand the intent of particular verses. Let's turn our attention to the book that is written entirely in Hebrew poetic style. Understanding the book of Psalms, also called the Psalter by many Christians, requires us to think of it differently. For us, Psalms are words we read in a book. However, these were originally songs that were sung individually or communally in worship. In fact, the term psalm means song. The book of Psalms, or the Psalter, is the largest book of the Bible and is actually made up of 5 smaller books that each have a similar ending. What is impressive about the book of Psalms is that the people sing about all their experiences, both good and bad, to God. You see, when we think of singing to God, we usually think about positive, joyful songs. However, as you read, the book of Psalms is filled not only with joyful songs, but many different types of songs. This book contains 3 basic types of songs. You read examples of all 3. The first is called a hymn of praise. These songs glorify God for who He is. Recall your reading from Psalm chapter 47, a song you may have heard sung in worship before. Here the singer was filled with joy and praised God because of His might, power, and majesty. The singer was praising God simply because He is the King of creation. His praise had no ulterior motive than simply praising God. The second type of song is called a lament, and is very different from those we are accustomed to. We usually only sing of glorious, joyful things to God. But the Israelites sang of all they experienced, both good and bad. A lament expresses the sorrow of the singer coupled with a petition for God to act. For example, in the 74th Psalm, you read a person's sorrowful words due to the success of his or her enemies, followed by a request for God to deliver him or her. More powerfully, you read in Psalm chapter 137 of the Israelites' sorrow and anger when they were defeated by the Babylonians. The Israelites went on to request that God destroy the Babylonians. You probably noted the very strong and discomforting thoughts at the end of the psalm. The purpose of psalms are to express raw emotion, both good and bad, which means thoughts expressed by the writer are not necessarily all true. However, we should learn from this that God is big enough and loves enough to hear our joys and sorrows and our celebrations and frustrations. The last type of song is called a song of thanksgiving. Here the singer worships God for something God has done. This is different from the hymn of praise, which glorifies God simply for who He is. You saw a great example of a song of thanksgiving in the 116th Psalm. While we don't know why, it is clear that the singer faces a serious illness or death. However, God restores his or her health. For this, the singer is thankful. Can you now identify the type of songs found in Psalm chapter 40, Psalm chapter 50, and Psalm chapter 93? After you take a moment to do this, answer the relational questions to see how the book of Psalms can shape your life.